So I guess, ooh,
Sorry, that was us. Go for it.
okay, so start over. Well, hello everyone. My name is Maria Quintana. I am a councilwoman for the city of Bell. I'm also an attorney, which is the reason why Mia Martinez invited me to come and, say a couple of words about what it's like to be a part of this profession. Interestingly enough, the speaker that just came in earlier was doing a pitch on the Rotary Club. And I actually would dare say that a lot of my activities now as a councilwoman stems from activities that I did with the Interact Club, which is a student organization that's founded by the Rotary Club. So I started that organization actually when I was in high school, and it is a service organization that is now still in existence in Bell High School over 30 years later. And I'm really, really proud of that. And like the speaker mentioned, it is a service organization, and it does tie you in to a lot of professionals that you can meet, and they can guide you. Basically serve as mentors and give you a little bit of an in as to what it's like to be whatever profession you're interested in doing. But as for myself, let's see, in a nutshell, I am a councilwoman for the city of Bell. I am an attorney. I started my legal career doing litigation, and then I moved over to real estate finance, and then I did municipal law. And before that, I was a college professor. And before that, I used to do real estate brokerage work. And I'm kind of throwing a lot of things out there because I've done a lot of things, but also to highlight with the things that you can do by being an attorney. So I'm sure a lot of people have said, being an attorney gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of things. And in fact, that is the case. The primary thing that being an attorney does is it teaches you how to think, critical thinking skills, but more importantly, teaches you how to think like an attorney, which is an incredibly valuable skills that you can transfer to every profession. Let's see. You guys want to start off with a couple of questions? That way, get this thing going. So it's a little bit more conversational.
Yeah, I think like everyone maybe wants to hear like how you got interested in law and like your first steps of like thinking about the law, maybe what you studied in undergrad, kind of some background.
Okay. All right. So I guess stemming back from high school, I was always that kid. I was student body president and homecoming queen. So I was really involved. I really liked high school. I did. Obviously minus the trials and tribulations that you go through as a teenager. My favorite class was US history and government and economics, right? So that kind of just naturally leads you towards an area of the law. So being in local government, again, being a student, being student body president, et cetera, it was just something that was kind of in the background. But I guess what really cemented my going to law was in college. And I'll start off with my background there. So I graduated from high school, and I was a scholarship kid. I went on to Yale University. I graduated from there. Then I came back home for a year, my Bell community, and I was just not feeling being back at home. I wasn't really, after being gone for 4 years, and I come from a very conservative Catholic family, I just was not feeling it. So I looked for employment elsewhere, and I got a job teaching statistics at the University of Navarre in Spain. So I left the country and got a job teaching. So I was teaching statistics for 3 years at the University of Navarre. I really enjoyed being a professor. I did. I wrote a master's thesis there while I was teaching. I was teaching at the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration. And along with teaching, you somewhat help researchers. I'm sure you guys have TAs in college right now. So I was one of those students that, taught you guys. In the process of doing that, I got my master's in economics, and I knew I wasn't going to stay in Europe, right? So, but I wanted to pursue a career in academia. And the reason why I kind of decided to go to Spain to begin with is that when I was in LA, I was a little bit confused as to what I wanted to do. And for the most part at Yale, at least during that time, the options were either to become a lawyer, to become a doctor, to become an investment banker, or to become a professor. So I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor, and I knew I didn't want to do investment banking. So the other two options were being a lawyer, being a professor. So in the US, you can't be a professor until you are legitimately enrolled in a PhD program. But in other countries, you can do it as a TA. So that's exactly, why I went there. So after I finished getting my master's, I applied to law school with the idea of becoming a college professor. So during those 3 years in law school, I got involved in, took my classes, etc., and I explored my different areas of the law. So I kind of made my JD more into a PhD in jurisprudence. So I took a lot of classes in human rights. I went to Columbia Law School. Columbia Law School is known for human rights. It's also a big civil rights school of thought. So if you guys are familiar with Brown v. Board, which is the case that eliminated segregation in the United States, that whole school of thought came from Columbia Law School. So I'm sharing that because it kind of shows the professors and the school of thoughts that comes from there. So while I was there, I graduated from, again, I went to law school with that idea. But when I finished law school, I came back to California, and to my surprise, I didn't pass the bar right away. So because I didn't pass the bar right away, I started doing just real estate, as I was studying. Once you study for the bar, by the way, when you study for the bar, you're essentially learning a lot of real estate. So it's really easy if you have that background to just take the broker exam and get started on that. And that's how I ended up doing real estate finance, which you do kind of need a legal background for. So it's a little bit like my story is a little bit kind of out there, but that's essentially how I became an attorney and became a real estate attorney. And then during that time, I got a fellowship in litigation because, again, I didn't really know what area of the law I wanted to be in. So I got a fellowship with the BOTA, which is the American Board of Trial Advocates. And that organization is primarily for lawyers who go to court. They're what you know as the trial attorneys. So I did that fellowship for a year. So during that time period, I kind of combined litigation, fellowship in litigation, real estate finance, and studying for the bar. And then lo and behold, I just kind of kept going with real estate finance for several years until a scandal in the city of Bell broke out, which is the summer of 2010. You guys can Google it and find out what happened in my city. So I decided to run for office as part of community service and help my city. So after working for my city for a couple of years, I developed an expertise in municipal law. So I switched over to municipal law. So that's what I'm doing now. I do public law, municipal law, and I represent cities and school districts and public entities.
Yeah, could you talk a bit about your experience in college? What sort of things you did helped you to get where you are today? What sort of things you would advise against doing, on what mistakes you made?
Well, mistakes. Okay, so I always say that, you guys, the college years are probably I always describe them as, for me, my college years were probably the 4 best years of my life, quite honestly, because you're in an environment in which your only mistake, quite honestly, is getting a bad grade, right? I mean, that's not the end of the world. What I would recommend during your 4 years, now that you're in college, is to explore as many outlets that you may want to do. This is a time where you get to figure out what your likes and your dislikes are, what your preferences are, and explore that. Because what counts, I feel professionally, what really kind of matters is what you do afterwards. Like, you need a BA to continue on to form a career elsewhere. But during those 4 years, figure out what you like to do. Figure out what you feel like you need to prepare for yourself. Like, for example, I didn't think I was a good writer when I got to Yale. So I took a lot of writing classes, almost to the detriment, because my background is like, I felt more comfortable in high school with like the sciences and math. I mean, which when I was in Spain, by the way, I taught statistics. So that was kind of my frame of mind, but I felt very weak when it came to writing. So I took a lot of those seminar classes. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I would recommend that you use your 4 years in college to explore what it is that you like, and think that the mistakes that you make are not really mistakes. They're really learning lessons as to what you want or do not want to do.
Could you also talk about in law school, when you were in law school, what sort of things, what study habits did you develop? What things would you recommend for us to get started on in order to have like a successful career in law school?
Okay. Wow. That's a loaded question. Depends on what you want to do. I went to law school with the intention of being a professor, right? So, when it comes to study habits, I mean, there's no denying the better the grades you have, the better the opportunities and the choices that you'll have when you apply to law schools. So, I mean, if there's one tip of advice that I can give you, is like, strive to get the best grades possible, because they do matter when you apply. And then the second other component that's really important is your LSAT score. So take that exam very seriously, especially if you don't have a high GPA. You do recommend that you have a high LSAT score. I think it's kind of changing now that maybe some schools are not even requiring that exam, but I can tell you that when I applied, it mattered. The LSAT score and your GPA does matter. That being said, it also depends what type of an attorney you want to do. Like, what type of an area you're initially interested in participating. Like, do you want to go into academia? Do you want to do trial work? Do you want to do entertainment law? If you already kind of have an inclination as to what area you're interested in, then tackle like those type of schools. I recommend, and and some attorneys might differ, but in my experience, I have found that the legal profession is probably one of the most elitist professions there are, and people will always ask you where you went to law school, as opposed to undergrad or what was your major or what like people will stop asking you what your GPA is. People will stop asking you where you went to college, et cetera, et cetera. But in the legal profession, they will always ask you, where did you go to law school? So it matters.
Yeah, so I kind of just think like that you should expand on like what specifically like municipal law means. I feel like a lot of us are just trying to get an idea of like kind of how
Okay.
the everyday life is. So
Okay. You guys are I can barely hear you. So you want me to explain to you what municipal law is?
yeah, and kind of like what things do you specifically work on like every day?
Okay, so municipal law, basically I represent cities. So I represent public entities too. So I always describe this to like my students. There's like two type of attorneys. This is very simplistic, but I think it helps with the analysis. You have the attorneys who go to court, and you have the attorneys who basically do transactions, right? So under my umbrella, municipal law represent essentially public law. So my clients are municipalities, are special districts, which consist, for example, of water boards, school boards. So I represent the actual entity. So again, cities, counties, school districts, water boards, fire departments, government agencies. And the work that I do specifically for them is represent the entity itself. So when it comes to employment matters, for example, there's always cases between the entity and staff. There's a lot of union work too. A lot of government agencies, their workforce is unionized. So I handle a lot of the labor disputes that might surface between the employer and the union.
Does anyone else have any questions right now?
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I do. I was just gonna say, because we were talking about study habits of what would be best when we go to law school. Because you were talking about the LSAT, I was just gonna ask, do you have any specific study habits that you would recommend for the LSAT, something that like specifically helped you, whether that was like repetition or like something that
Yeah, I'll tell you what
you
happened to
think?
me. Okay, I wasn't a good test taker. So
Mm-hmm.
without exaggeration, I think I took the Princeton Review or Kaplan, like one of those. I took one class
Mm-hmm.
and then I bought the books for the other. But what helped me is literally taking a practice exam every day. So my
Oh,
GPA, I didn't have a bad GPA at Yale, and I was going into law school again with the intention of being a professor, but I already had my master's degree. So I knew that my GPA, I couldn't change my GPA anymore, and it wasn't bad. But the LSAT was important because I'm not a good test taker. So I promise you, without exaggeration, every day for 26 days before the exam, I took a practice exam. So literally my
mm,
life was an LSAT exam. So I was living in Spain at the time, by the way. I was living in Spain at the time. So I knew that my time period, my exam was going to be like at 2 p.m. So I would take an exam at 2 p.m., finish it. If I remember correctly, it would take like 3.5 hours. So I would take the exam from like 2 to whenever it was finished. And then I would review the exam at night and in the morning, and I would do it again. Literally for 26 days, I
oh,
would take those exams so that the day that I took the exam, it was just another day. And
okay.
what I found
Mhm.
that really helped is that it trains your mind into really understanding the exam, because you can take a class and they'll give you examples, but it's not until you really get into and immerse yourself into the exam that you start getting it. And I promise you, the more exams that you do, the more familiar you're going to become. So for those of you that are studying for the LSATs, the game section, for example, it became super easy. It was just a game, right? Because you've seen so many games that the setup is easy, the recognition is easy. There's only so many variations that they can give you, but the trick is to you becoming familiar with the exam so that you can score better than everybody else.
Thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, I'm not gonna joke. I mean, the legal profession, and I'll be honest, the legal profession is not easy. It really isn't. It's not hard to be a lawyer. It's not hard to be in law school. It's not hard to get into law school either. But it's very satisfying, and it's a beautiful career. So it'll be very routine, and you'll feel very exhausted, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Sure.
What was your GPA going into law school? Or what
I mean, I graduated from law school. I graduated from Yale in 1997. So I'm aging myself. I honestly, I can't tell you, but it was probably like a 3.5 or above. And then I got a master. I mean, I'll disclose everything. It was probably like 3.5 or above, or but it's different because actually, let me take that back, because I think when you apply, you have to submit your GPA, I mean, your transcripts, and then they do a modification of your GPA. So I went in there with a decent GPA, and then again, I had a master's, and my master's, I mean, I did really well, but a master's is a little bit different because I wrote a thesis. So when you write a thesis, you have to defend it. So you really only get like 2 grades, and I mean, I did well. So grades matter. I'm not going to lie to you. They do matter. And the LSATs matter.
Any other questions right now? You talked about, this is one question.
No, after Charlotte.
Oh, okay. You talked about real estate finance and how having a JD could be helpful in that profession. Could you like explain what real estate finance is and sort of what it was like to work in that field?
Okay, so perfect. That's good. So when, again, I didn't pass the bar right away. I actually ended up passing the bar and staying in real estate finance just because I honestly enjoyed it. So remember, I gave the description of being a contract attorney or being a trial attorney. So when you do real estate finance, you put deals together. So specifically, I used to work for a company that used to build entertainment centers, of which their anchor tenant was a movie theater. So the name of the company was Maya Cinemas North America. I used to call it like the Mexican Magic Johnson. You know, like they did a bunch of movie theaters. So in real estate finance, my responsibility was literally to put the deals together, to put the financing terms together. So what does that mean? I did the deals and I put them on paper. I drafted the contracts and negotiated the deal terms and made sure that the financing was in place. Sounds kind of boring, but I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I was just wondering, like, you talked about how the legal profession is obviously very challenging but satisfying for you. And I was just wondering what your like work-life balance and job satisfaction is like, more so as a lawyer than mayor, because I'm sure that has its own set of challenges, but just how is that?
Oh wow. Life work balance.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I think that's difficult for everyone in whatever profession you're in. The reason why I think it's satisfying, and like I'll highlight again my career, right? So when you think about it, I graduated from law school. I did litigation, didn't like that at all, right? Because I found that it was, funny enough, too adversarial. And you go into litigation, and the profession as a whole is adversarial in nature. But when I was working real estate finance, the reason why it was satisfying is because I essentially I built cities, right? So when you built an entertainment center, of which an anchor tenant is a movie theater, what I was doing was creating a community space in which community would come and hang out and purchase. And whatever sales tax revenue came through, they would give it over to the city to be able to provide more services. So in the grand scheme of things, when I did real estate finance, I saw myself as someone who built cities, that built spaces for community, right? So then when I moved over and became an elected official, then I became the policy person that mandated how that sales tax revenue was spent. Now, as a municipal attorney, I provide that guidance to public entities who are providing, right? They're the ones that have the resources, and they get to decide where the money will be spent. So all in all, I feel like throughout my career, I've been a public servant since beginning to the end. And the satisfaction is that I'm creating better communities for communities like mine. And I do focus, just to think, I do focus on communities that lack services, primarily because that's really where the need is, and just the target, the audience and the communities that I care to serve. In terms of finding work balance, it's not easy. I mean, you have to work a lot, but when you like what you like, if you do what you like, it's a lot easier to do.
Any other questions?
I had one more question, if you don't mind. So would you have any recommendations for someone like I guess co-curricular activities that want to go that who wants to go into international or human rights law? Are there like specific types of internships or like opportunities that you would say people should look into?
When to go into law school, or once you're in law school?
Um, uh, I guess like to go into law school or international, or someone who wants to go into international law or human rights law. Or if you have recommendations
Okay.
more of what to do in law school, I don't mind, whatever.
Okay, so let me see. I mean, I do believe, like I said before, take the 4 years that you have in college to do what you find you're interested in doing. So I don't know what organizations your school has, but I know we had, like, for example, when I was at Yale, we had Amnesty International. I mean, I was never really into
Mm-hmm.
that, but I know that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that your college counselor can tell you like what organizations exist. What I would recommend is that more than focusing on what organizations to participate in, I would say that whatever organization, whatever club you want to be a part of, you take a leadership position, right? It's not the same to be a member of 10 clubs versus being a leader in 2. It's not the same. It's not the same thing when you present your resume as someone who participates and assists versus someone who takes a leadership role in putting conferences together and putting events together and doing, I don't know, like newsletters or, I don't know, tutoring, things like that. So I think focus more on the role that you have, whatever club you're in, more than the club itself.
Okay, thank you so much.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Yes.
And the reason why it's
That's
important, I'm sorry?
go ahead. No, go
The
ahead.
reason why it's important is twofold, right? One, and again, I say, like, find a club, find an activity that you like, because if you like it, you're going to want to grow in it. You're going to want to do
Mm-hmm.
better, right? You're going to want to share your ideas with that group. And that shows leadership, right? That shows leadership, and schools look at that. And then secondly, you will enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, you're going to want to do more and be, bigger part of that organization. So thank you for turning on the camera. That's a lot easier than to like just talk. I
No,
feel like
for
I'm just
sure.
talking into space right now.
For sure. No, I didn't know if we were like supposed to or not, but I just did. Thank you so
No, that
much.
helps. That does help. Um, I mean, it's exciting. I think it's really cool that you guys have this club going on. Honestly, like, again, I went into law school with the idea of being a professor, and I got, I've deviated. I'm not teaching. I feel like I'm teaching every day when it comes to my constituents. But, all in all, I think I've been very open with my career, so I followed my heart. And the one thing that I do recommend that you do at every stage of your life is do a good job, like do a good job at whatever you do, because that by doing a good job at whatever you do, it'll allow you to do an easy transition into something else in case you want to, do a career. And when I always put it in context, I mean, most of you are what, like younger than 22, right? 22 or younger, since you're still in college. You have 4 years to figure out what it is that you like, don't like, to prepare for a career of like 50 years of working, right? You're probably going to start working at 22 and maybe retire when you're 70. We're talking about a 50 years of working, so the likelihood that you're going to stay in the same profession is very unlikely. So I find, and I recall my days when you're younger, you're very stressed out about what to do, right? Because you kind of want a formula, or you want a little bit of a pathway. And what I recommend is just, figure out what you want to do a good job at whatever it is that you're doing, so that you can pivot when your mind and your interest change, because they will. We're young, we change. I say we're young because I still consider myself young.
Thank you. My name's Daria, by the way. Sorry.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for turning in. Thank you for turning
you.
it on.
I have something else. I kind of wanted you to touch on the League of California Cities and kind of talk about how like your legal knowledge helps you make an impact there and stuff.
Okay. Right. So as an elected official, actually as a professional, because you'll find yourself part of many associations. You write down from like the building trades associations to legal associations. They're basically a group of professionals, right? So I belong to the League of California Cities, which is an association of cities in the state of California. So it's a national organization, and then each state branches off. So I'm a board member of the League of California Cities. And what we do there is we advise, being part of the board, we advise and focus on issues that pertain to cities. So I'll give you 3 examples that we're focusing on right now. We're focusing on homelessness, right? As you may all know, there's a severe homelessness problem in the state of California. We're also focusing on affordable housing, which is different, right? Because there's in California, if you follow the trends, you'll see that there's a big gap that's forming between the haves and the have-nots. So you'll find that there's a lot of folks who are homeless and can't afford certain homes, and then there's like the rich, right? So the middle class is disappearing. And then surprisingly, a lot of people don't know this, but the biggest liability that cities have is actually pension reform. You know, but I'm not talking about Social Security, I'm talking specifically like pension reform. So my role there is basically to focus on issues of cities and lobby the state legislature. So as an association, what we do is we focus on issues of cities, and we literally go to Sacramento and lobby on behalf of cities. So, I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed that part because it's allowed me to be with an association that has a lot of credibility. The League of California Cities has been in existence for 125 years. It's one of the largest lobbying groups in the state. So having that access there has allowed me to know where to go in Sacramento to bring resources back to the city of Bell. And I'll share a little bit of Bell because I think, it would help in the conversation. So in the summer of 2010, the city of Bell made world news, because they found that the city manager was paying himself millions in salaries, and so were the council members. So the DA filed charges against the city manager and the elected officials. Some of them went to jail, but it made a big story because the LA Times is the entity that discovered this fraud. They won a Pulitzer Prize for it. So I'm one of the electeds that got elected post scandal. And like I mentioned before, I ran to primarily because I'm from Bell. I was Bell High School's homecoming queen, student body president. So I thought that this would be my community service. I ran for a 2-year term, thinking that would be enough. And here I am 12 years later, still serving on the Bell City Council. So during that time period, what I found out, and this is where the real estate finance actually background really, really helped, is that we found out that the city of Bell was in debt by $155 million. And that's an incredible amount considering that our general fund was 13. So basically you think of a bank account. Our bank account is only 13, but we owe 155. So my city was at the brink of bankruptcy. So being a part of the League of California Cities allowed me to kind of attach myself to an association that taught me how to navigate Sacramento so that I knew where to go to advocate on behalf of my city. So, for example, being in elected office and being an attorney, I saw my role then as the city of Bell was my client, and wherever I went, I literally advocated for my city, my client. And having a legal background really helped for that reason. And again, having that real estate finance background helped because most of the liabilities, the reason why we were in debt by 155 million is because most of them were liabilities that the city had incurred buying properties.
Thank
Make
you.
sense?
Yes.
It's a little convoluted, but it's a little complex, I should say, but it's cool.
Any other questions in the audience? No? Mia, do you have any more?
No, I think I'm good. I think you like touched everything that we needed.
Yeah.
Does the Zoom have any questions?
I would say, sorry, one more question.
Okay.
Um, I would say, oh, if if maybe this is more of a personal question, but if you're thinking to maybe graduate a year early, or let's say you have a year where you if you graduate a year early, you can either go straight to law school right away, take a gap year, or like you have like an empty year. How would you say would be would you say maybe like taking like an internship or like maybe going for like a master's program to explore maybe what you maybe want to like specialize in law, or what would you say would be like the best way to take advantage of, let's say, a gap year or like a year before law school?
I got it. And I'll kind of go back to someone earlier said like, what mistakes did I make? Right. So what mistakes did I make? I would say that one of my mistakes that I made when I was a student, because outside like, when I was a student, I went straight. I mean, I thought that I was going to take time off because I graduated from college, right? And then I got a job in Spain, but I found myself
Mhm,
teaching again. So I found myself again in academia. So I feel like I went straight, and I kind of wish that I had taken some time off, So even though it was 4 years before I graduated from my undergrad to law school, those 3 years I got a master's, which I wasn't planning to
mhm,
do, by the way. It just happened because I kind of really fell in love with teaching. And I was with a professor that was really fascinating. When I was in Spain at the time, it was 1998 to 2001. That's before that's before Europe created the euro. So my advisor was a professor that was facilitated and assisted the country of Spain into the euro. So I just thought that the work that he was doing was really cool. So I enjoyed doing it at the time. But when I got to law school, I think I was a little burnt out. I think I was a little burnt out, and I saw my colleagues who had taken some time off to work,
mhm.
to like actually have a real job, okay, not an internship, nothing too exploratory, but actually to work, where they had to like go, I don't know, whatever they were doing. I felt like when they were in law school, they enjoyed it a lot more than I did. I think I just, at that point, I was still kind of in the mode like, okay, I got to do this, because I eventually want to teach. And I was kind of in
Mhm.
the frame of mind that I'm going to be a professor anyway. So this is kind of like my life, and then look at me now, you know 20 something years later, not doing that. So in hindsight, I wish I kind of had really taken a job, like known what the quote unquote real world is before we're
Mhm.
going back into law school. I think that
Thank
taking that
mhm.
break will give you a break so that when you are in law school, you can put your full energy in there.
Got it. Thank you, sir. And do you think that made you like a more like were you concerned about, because I also like teaching as well, so I was thinking maybe to go into a teaching program before law school, but do you think like um that you should be worried about, or worry about like if you are like an attractive candidate or not? Because sometimes they say that they frown upon like maybe gap years or like taking time off when you
No,
could
they
be
don't. They
more
don't. That's not
productive.
true. That don't.
Okay,
And honestly, they I mean, there's a lot of myths. And by the way, we have, I don't know how long we could be here, but feel free to ask me any questions. And the personal questions are just as important, quite honestly, because you're going to spend three
sorry,
years of
thank
your
you.
life doing this, and they're not going to be easy. So I welcome them as well, and I'm open to that too. Don't worry too much about what they frown upon and what they don't, because quite honestly, they don't. When I can tell you that when I was at Yale, I used to do admissions
Mhm,
because I wanted to recruit. I mean, I'm Latina, I'm Mexican American, I'm first generation. So I used to do admissions for Yale, and I still interview students to go there.
yeah,
And we look at everything. And this is at the undergraduate level. So you do look at grades, you look at LSAT scores, probably, besides the fact that I recommend that you have a high GPA and high LSAT score. The
mhm,
other area that I think you should focus on is your personal statement. Like, what are you going to say about yourself? What's going to distinguish you from other candidates? And I think the time period or in the activities and the clubs and the leadership stuff that you do that you can highlight about yourself, people read that, and that's what they look at when they decide whether or not to admit you. So if you want to teach, go for it. You know, I mean, literally, I taught for 3 years and ended up doing that, and I wrote about that. But there's plenty of people who worked, and talked about, whatever it is that they were going through. But what I would just say is like, whatever you do, do well. enjoy it, and use it as an opportunity to grow as an individual to determine whether or not you want to go to law school and be an attorney, or go to law school and do something else.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was so helpful. Thank
Yeah, no
you.
one will frown upon anything, really. Like you know, you are yourself, and when you apply, you will be yourself, and they'll look at that.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm just going to look more into like what I can do that'll be more most productive in like how and like what and just explore being exploratory, I guess, before I go to law
And
school.
again, that's, you know, to piggyback on the question that someone else mentioned, I wish I had taken a little bit of time off, you know, like real time off, like not worked at a university and getting a master's degree, but like really taking some time off to get a little bit of perspective. I just think I would have enjoyed my college experience a lot more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Yeah,
Carla,
thank
can I
you.
touch on a couple things that I thought can I share a couple things that I think are important?
Yeah, of
Yes, of
course.
course.
Okay, all right.
Please.
So let's talk about financial aid, because I think people really worry about debt when they go into college, when they go into law school. And, you know, I've said this before with other folks, you know, I would not worry about the debt. And I know it sounds like very fluffy to say this, but if you're serious about being an attorney, you will make a decent living. You know, attorneys get paid, you know, like they don't get paid. Some of them get paid a lot, some of them don't. But depending on the area of law that you go into, there are ways that you can finance your education. So the reason why I'm sharing that is that I really discourage and try to tell people, like, don't let the financial situation motivate you or deter you from applying to schools that you want to go to. You know, like this is the time period in which you invest in yourself so that when you graduate, you'll have a better job. For that investment.
Oh,
You know, and for some folks, for example, like people, you know, someone mentioned they wanted to do like humanitarian law or human rights law.
That was me.
Some of those areas, yeah, so some of those areas, they're financed. So if you do like public service, there are programs in which when you finish and you work a certain amount of years, then your school debt gets covered. So I know that I remember that Columbia Law School had that. If you did public service for an X amount of years, then your a certain number, X amount of debts or whatever loans that you took on would be forgiven. And then for those who wanted to do corporate, well, you know, corporate lawyers make a lot of money. So it's you know, you'll pay it off.
great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions about that? No, okay. If you have anything else you want to touch on?
No, that's it. I mean, that's all I can think of right now. I mean, I guess in a nutshell, you know, I think it's exciting. You guys are, again, my best 4 years of my life were my college years. You know, I think in hindsight, you know, my biggest worry was a grade. Your biggest worry is a grade. You know, the grand scheme of things, focus on that. You really take those 4 years to know what it is that you like and don't like, and, you know, push forward. If you already know that you want to be attorneys, then you're way ahead of the game. You know, like, again, I went into law school wanting to be a professor, and, you know, I ended up practicing. So knowing that is a huge advantage. And the brutal truth is that grades do matter, and your LSATs do matter, and whatever school you go to does matter. That being said, if for whatever reason you don't end up going into the top university of your choice, that by far does not mean that your legal career is over, because ultimately you have 50 years probably, or 40 years, or whatever years there are, to prove and develop a really successful career in, you know, in the legal sphere. So my best wishes. You know, you guys have my contact info. If you have any other questions that you didn't want to pose for now, feel free to reach out at any time.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out to be here. And yeah, I think we'll definitely be in contact, and hopefully you can come out to speak with us again.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think the personal contact is a lot better than a Zoom meeting. So, you know,
Yeah,
if I'm near San Diego, I'll stop by.
that would be great. We'd really love to have you. Well, thank you very much, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you again.
Likewise.
All right,
Take
bye-bye.
care. Bye, everyone.